What is the Doppler effect?
The Austrian physicist Christian Doppler, 1803 to 1853, in 1842 explained the phenomenon of the apparent change in wavelength of radiation such as sound or light emitted either by a moving body, source, or by the moving receiver. The frequency of the wavelengths increases and the wavelength becomes shorter as the moving source approaches, producing high-pitched sounds and bluish light, called blue shift. Likewise, as the source recedes from the receiver, the frequency of the wavelength 6 decreases. The sound is pitched lower, and light appears reddish, called red shift. This Doppler effect is commonly demonstrated by the whistle of an approaching train or the roar of a jet aircraft. There are three differences between acoustical, sound, and optical, light, Doppler effects. The optical frequency change is not dependent on what is moving the source or observer, nor is it affected by the medium through which the waves are moving, but acoustical frequency is affected by such conditions. Optical frequency changes are affected if the source or observer moves at right angles to the line connecting the source and observer. Observed acoustical changes are not affected in such a situation. Applications of the Doppler phenomenon include the Doppler radar and the measurement by astronomers of the motion and direction of celestial bodies.
What is the basic unit of the brain?
Neurons are the nerve cells that are the major constituent of the brain. At birth, the brain has the maximum number of neurons, 20 billion to 200 billion neurons. Thousands are lost daily, never to be replaced and apparently not missed, until the cumulative loss builds up in very old age.
Who was the number pope?
The number pope was Gerbert of Aurich, c. 940-1003, Pope Sylvester II. He was fascinated by mathematics and was instrumental in the adoption of Arabic numerals to replace Roman numerals in Western Europe.
Why is evolution a theory?
A scientific theory is an explanation of observed phenomena that is supported by the available scientific data. The term theory is used as an indication that the explanation will be modified as new data becomes available. For example, the Darwin-Wallace theory was proposed prior to the discovery of the molecular nature of genetics, but has since been expanded to encompass that information as well.
What are endorphins?
Endorphins and closely related chemicals called enkephalins are part of a larger group called opioids, which have properties similar to drugs such as heroin or morphine. They can act not only as painkillers but also can induce a sense of well-being or euphoria. Clinical applications of endorphin research include possible treatments for some forms of mental illness, treatment or control of pain for chronic pain sufferers, development of new anesthetics, and the development of non-addictive, safe, and effective pain relievers.
Why are the horse latitudes called by that name?
The horse latitudes are two high-pressure belts characterized by low winds about 30 degrees north and south of the equator. Dreaded by early sailors, these areas have undependable winds with periods of calm. In the northern hemisphere, particularly near Bermuda, sailing ships carrying horses from Spain to the New World were often becalmed. When water supplies ran low, these animals were the first to be rationed water. Dying from thirst or tossed overboard, the animals were sacrificed to conserve water for the men. Explorers and sailors reported that the seas were strewn with bodies of horses, which may be why the areas are called the horse latitudes. The term might also be rooted in complaints by sailors who were paid in advance and received no overtime when the ship slowly traversed this area. During this time they were said to be working off a dead horse.
Does catgut really come from cats?
Catgut, an absorbable sterile strand, is obtained from collagen derived from healthy mammals. It was originally prepared from the submucosal layer of the intestines of sheep. It is used as a surgical ligature. The major advantage of minimally invasive surgery is that it is less traumatic to the patient. There is less scarring, and recovery time is much quicker. Hospital stays are shorter.
What is vitrification?
Vitrification is a technique that transforms radioactive liquid waste into a solid. The nuclear material is mixed with sand or clay. The mixture is then heated to the melting point of the sand or to the point the clay forms a ceramic. Although the resulting composite material is still radioactive, it is much easier and safer to handle, transport, and store the radioactive liquid waste as a solid.
What are Cuisenaire rods?
The Cuisenaire method is a teaching system used to help young students independently discover basic mathematical principles. Developed by Émile Georges Cuisenaire, 1891 to 1976, a Belgian schoolteacher. The method uses rods of 10 different colors and lengths that are easy to handle. The rods help students understand mathematical principles rather than merely memorizing them. They are also used to teach elementary arithmetic properties such as associative, commutative, and distributive properties.
What is meant by an imperfect flower?
An imperfect flower is one that is unisexual, having either stamens, male parts, or pistils, female parts, but not both.
What are the 4 Cs of diamonds?
The 4 Cs are cut, color, clarity, and carat. Cut refers to the proportions, finish, symmetry, and polish of the diamond. These factors determine the brilliance of a diamond. Color describes the amount of color the diamond contains. Color ranges from colorless to yellow with tints of yellow, gray, or brown. Colors can also range from intense yellow to the more rare blue, green, pink, and red. Clarity describes the cleanness or purity of a diamond, as determined by the number and size of imperfections. Carat is the weight of the diamond.
Is all DNA found in the nucleus?
In addition to the nuclear DNA of eukaryotic cells, mitochondria, an organelle found in both plant and animal cells, and chloroplasts, found in plant and algal cells, both contain DNA. Mitochondrial DNA contains genes essential to cellular metabolism. Chloroplast DNA contains genetic information essential to photosynthesis.
How does a cardiac pacemaker differ from an implantable defibrillator?
Both pacemakers and implantable defibrillators are used to treat arrhythmias in the heart rate. A pacemaker monitors the electrical impulses in the heart and delivers electrical pulses as necessary to make the heart beat in a more normal rhythm.
How many different types of neurons are found in nerve tissue?
There are 3 main types of neurons: 1. Sensory neurons, 2. Motor neurons, and 3. Interneurons, also called association neurons. Sensory neurons conduct impulses from sensory organs, eyes, ears, and the surface of the skin, into the central nervous system. Motor neurons conduct impulses from the central nervous system to muscles or glands. Interneurons are neither sensory neurons nor motor neurons. They permit elaborate processing of information to generate complex behaviors. Interneurons comprise the majority of neurons in the central nervous system.
What is the instrument a doctor uses to check reflexes?
A plessor or percussor is a small hammer, usually with a soft rubber head, used to tap the part directly. Also called a reflex hammer or a percussion hammer. It is used by a doctor to elicit reflexes by tapping on tendons. In the most common test, the patient sits on a surface high enough to allow his legs to dangle freely, and the physician lightly taps the patellar tendon, just below the kneecap. This stimulus briefly stretches the quadriceps muscle on top of the thigh. The stretch causes the muscle to contract, which makes the leg kick forward. The time interval between the tendon tap and the start of the leg extension is about 50 microseconds. That interval is too short for the involvement of the brain and is totally reflexive. This test indicates the status of an individual's reflex control of movement.
Why are the rare gases and rare earth elements called rare?
Rare gases refers to the elements helium, neon, argon, krypton, and xenon. They are rare in that they are gases of very low density, rarefied at ordinary temperatures and are found only scattered in minute quantities in the atmosphere and in some substances. In addition, rare gases have zero valence and normally will not combine with other elements to make compounds. Rare earth elements are elements numbered 58 through 71 in the periodic table plus yttrium. Y, element 39, and thorium, Th, element 90. They are called rare earths because they are difficult to extract from monazite ore, where they occur. The term has nothing to do with scarcity or rarity in nature.
Which organism has the largest number of chromosomes?
Ophioglossum reticulatum, a species of fern, has the largest number of chromosomes with more than 1,260, 630 pairs.
What is the greatest number of leaves a clover can have?
Fourteen-leafed white clover, Trifolium repens, and a 14-leafed red clover, Trifolium praetens, have been found in the United States.
Why are Dalmatians firehouse dogs?
Before automobiles, coaches and carriages were often accompanied by dogs that kept horses company and guarded them from theft. Dalmatians were particularly well known for the strong bond they formed with horses, and firemen, who often owned the strongest and speediest horses in the area, kept the dogs at the station to deter horse thieves. Although fire engines have replaced horses, Dalmatians have remained a part of firehouse life. Both for the appeal of these beautiful dogs and for their nostalgic tie to the past.
What food odors do dogs like best?
In a study of different foods, researchers found that liver and chicken ranked higher than everything else, including hamburgers, fish, vegetables, and fresh fruit.
What is the Königsberg Bridge problem?
The city of Königsberg was located in Prussia on the Pregel River. Two islands in the river were connected by 7 bridges. By the 18th century, it had become a tradition for the citizens of Königsberg to go for a walk through the town, trying to cross each bridge only once. No one was able to succeed, and the question was asked whether it was possible to do so. In 1736, Leonard Euler, 1707–1783, proved that it was not possible to cross the Königsberg bridges only once. Euler's solution led to the development of 2 new areas of mathematics, graph theory, which deals with questions about networks of points that are connected by lines, and topology, which is the study of those aspects of the shape of an object that do not depend on length measurements.
How is activated charcoal used medically?
Activated charcoal is an organic substance, such as burned wood or coal, that has been heated to approximately 1000 degrees Fahrenheit 537 degrees Celsius in a controlled atmosphere. The result is a fine powder containing thousands of pores that have great absorbent qualities to rapidly absorb toxins and poisons. Activated charcoal is used medically in the treatment of drug overdoses and poisonings.
What are the functions of the urinary system?
The functions of the urinary system include regulation of body fluids, removal of metabolic waste products, regulation of volume and chemical makeup of blood plasma, and excretion of toxins.
How much garbage does the average American generate?
According to the Environmental Protection Agency, about 250 million tons of municipal waste was generated in 2008. This is equivalent to 4.5 pounds, 2.0 kilograms, per person per day, or approximately 1,650 pounds, 730 kilograms, per year.
Which elements have the most isotopes?
The elements with the most isotopes, with 36 each, are xenon, Xe, with 9 stable isotopes. Identified from 1920 to 1922, and 27 radioactive isotopes, identified from 1939 to 1981, and cesium, Cs. With 1 stable isotope, identified in 1921, and 35 radioactive isotopes, identified from 1935 to 1983. The element with the fewest number of isotopes is hydrogen, H, with 3 isotopes, including 2 stable ones protium. Identified in 1920, and deuterium, often called heavy water, identified in 1931, and 1 radioactive isotope tritium. First identified in 1934, although not considered a radioactive isotope in 1939.
How do wounds heal?
Damage to tissue, such as a cut in the skin, begins to heal with the formation of a sticky lump known as a blood clot. Blood clots prevent blood and other fluids from leaking out. Microscopic sticky threads of the clotting protein fibrin make a tangled mesh that traps blood cells. Within a short time the clot begins to take shape, harden, and become more solid. The clot turns into a scab as it dries and hardens. Skin cells beneath the scab multiply to repair the damage. When the scab falls off, the wound will be healed.
How do sound waves differ from light waves?
Waves consist of a series of motions in regular succession carrying energy from one place to another without moving any matter. Periodic waves include ocean waves, sound waves, and electromagnetic waves. Visible light and radio waves are electromagnetic waves. Mechanical waves, such as ocean waves and sound waves, involve matter. But it is important to remember that there is no transport of matter. The water in an ocean wave does not move from one location to another, merely the energy of the wave is transported. Light waves involve only energy without matter.
What was the first retrovirus discovered?
Dr. Robert Gallo, 1937, discovered the first retrovirus, human T-cell lymphoma virus, HTLV. In 1979. The second human retrovirus to be discovered was human immunodeficiency virus, HIV.
Is it ever too cold to snow?
No matter how cold the air gets, it still contains some moisture. And this can fall out of the air in the form of very small snow crystals. Very cold air is associated with no snow because these invasions of air from northerly latitudes are associated with clearing conditions behind cold fronts. Heavy snowfalls are associated with relatively mild air in advance of a warm front. The fact that snow piles up, year after year, in Arctic regions illustrates that it is never too cold to snow.
How is patient-controlled analgesia, PCA, administered?
This is a drug delivery system that dispenses a preset intravenous, 4 dose of a narcotic analgesic for reduction of pain whenever a patient pushes a switch on an electric cord. The device consists of a computerized pump with a chamber containing a syringe holding up to 60 milliliters of a drug. The patient administers a dose of narcotic when the need for pain relief arises. A lockout interval device automatically inactivates the system if the patient tries to increase the amount of narcotic within a preset time period.
What are some general effects of aging on the human body?
The aging process affects every organ system. Some changes begin as early as ages 30 to 40. The aging process becomes more rapid between ages 55 and 60.
What are the 7 Millennium Prize problems?
The 7 Millennium Prize problems are, Birch and Swinnerton-Dyer conjecture, Hodge conjecture, Poincaré conjecture, Riemann hypothesis, solution of the Navier-Stokes equations, formulation of the Yang-Mills theory, PVSNP.
How much skin does a person shed in 1 year?
An average man or woman sheds about 600,000 particles of skin per hour, which is approximately 1.5 pounds, 680 grams, per year. Using this figure, by the age of 70, a person will have lost 105 pounds. 47.6 kilograms, of skin, which is equivalent to 2/3 of their entire body weight.
What are Landsat maps?
They are images of Earth taken at an altitude of 567 miles, 912 kilometers, by an orbiting Landsat satellite, or ERTS, Earth Resources Technology Satellite. The Landsats were originally launched in the 1970s. Rather than cameras, the Landsats use multispectral scanners, which detect visible green and blue wavelengths, and 4 infrared and near-infrared wavelengths. These scanners can detect differences between soil, rock, water, and vegetation, types of vegetation, states of vegetation, e.g., healthy/unhealthy or underwatered/well-watered, and mineral content. The differences are especially accurate when multiple wavelengths are compared using multispectral scanners. Even visible light images have proved useful. Some of the earliest Landsat images showed that some small Pacific islands were up to 10 miles, 16 kilometers, away from their charted positions. The results are displayed in false color maps, where the scanner data is represented in shades of easily distinguishable colors. Usually, infrared is shown as red, red as green, and green as blue. The maps are used by farmers, oil companies, geologists, foresters, foreign governments, and others interested in land management. Each image covers an area approximately 115 square miles, 185 square kilometers. Maps are offered for sale by the United States Geological Survey. Other systems that produce similar images include the French spot satellites, Russian Salyut and Mir manned space stations, and NASA's Airborne Imaging Spectrometer, which senses 128 infrared bands. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratories are developing instruments that will sense 224 bands in infrared, which will be able to detect specific minerals absorbed by plants.
What is Kevlar?
The registered trademark Kevlar refers to synthetic fiber called liquid crystalline polymers. Discovered by Stephanie Kwolek, 1923, Kevlar is a thin, very strong fiber. It is best known for its use in bulletproof garments.
Who introduced the gypsy moth into the United States?
In 1869, Professor Leopold Trevellet. 1827 to 1895, brought gypsy moth egg masses from France to Medford, Massachusetts. His intention was to breed the gypsy moth, Portheitria dispar, with the silkworm to overcome a wilt disease of the silkworm. He placed the egg masses on a window ledge, and evidently the wind blew them away. About 10 years later these caterpillars were numerous on trees in that vicinity. And in 20 years, trees in eastern Massachusetts were being defoliated. In 1911, a contaminated plant shipment from Holland also introduced the gypsy moth to Massachusetts. Gypsy moths are now found throughout the entire northeastern United States and portions of Virginia, North Carolina, Ohio, and Michigan. The gypsy moth lays its eggs on the leaves of oaks, birches, maples, and other hardwood trees. When the yellow hairy caterpillars hatch from the eggs, They devour the leaves in such quantities that the tree becomes temporarily defoliated. Sometimes this causes the tree to die. The caterpillars grow from 0.5 inch, 3 millimeters, to about 2 inches, 5.1 centimeters. Before they spin a pupa, in which they will metamorphose into adult moths.
Does sound travel faster in air or water?
The speed of sound is not a constant, it varies depending on the medium in which it travels. The measurement of sound velocity in the medium of air must take into account many factors, including air temperature, pressure, and purity. At sea level and 32 degrees Fahrenheit 0 degrees Celsius, scientists do not agree on a standard figure. Estimates range from 740 to 741.5 miles, 1191.6 to 1193.2 kilometers per hour. As air temperature rises, sound velocity increases. Sound travels faster in water than in air and even faster in iron and steel. Sounds traveling a mile in air for 5 seconds will travel the same distance in 1 second underwater and 1/3 of a second in steel.
What is a bishop's ring?
It is a ring around the sun, usually with a reddish outer edge. It is probably due to dust particles in the air, since it is observed after all great volcanic eruptions.
What 3 groups are included in the flatworms?
Flatworms belong to the phylum Platyhelminthes. They are flat, elongated, achylomate animals that exhibit bilateral symmetry and have primitive organs. The members of the flatworms are 1. Planarians, 2. Flukes, and 3. Tapeworms.
What is quicksand?
Quicksand is a mass of sand and mud that contains a large amount of water. A thin film separates individual grains of sand so the mixture has the characteristics of a liquid. Quicksand is found at the mouths of large rivers or other areas that have a constant source of water. Heavy objects, including humans, can sink when encountering quicksand and the mixture collapses. However, since the density of the sand/water mix is slightly greater than the density of the human body, most humans can actually float on quicksand.
What are the organs of the endocrine system?
The endocrine system consists of glands and other hormone-producing tissues. Glands are specialized cells that secrete hormones into the interstitial fluid. Hormones are then transported to the capillaries and circulated via the blood. The major endocrine glands are the pituitary, thyroid, parathyroid, pineal, and adrenal glands. Other hormone-secreting organs are the central nervous system, hypothalamus, kidneys, heart, pancreas, thymus, ovaries, and testes. Some organs, such as the pancreas, secrete hormones as an endocrine function but have other functions also.
What does 1 acre of trees yield when cut and processed?
There are about 660 trees on 1 acre in a forest. When cut, 1 acre of trees may yield approximately 105,000 board feet of lumber or more than 30 tons of paper or 16 cords of firewood.
Which is the deepest cave in the United States?
Lechuguilla Cave, in Carlsbad Caverns National Park, New Mexico, is the deepest cave in the United States. Its depth is 1,565 feet, 477 meters. Unlike most caves in which carbon dioxide mixes with rainwater to produce carbonic acid, Carlsbad Caverns was shaped by sulfuric acid. The sulfuric acid was a result of a reaction between oxygen that was dissolved in groundwater and hydrogen sulfide that emanated from far below the cave's surface.
What are the precious metals?
This is a general term for expensive metals that are used for making coins, jewelry, and ornaments. The name is limited to gold, silver, and platinum. Expense or rarity does not make a metal precious, but rather it is a value set by law that states that the object made of these metals has a certain intrinsic value. The term is not synonymous with noble metals, although a metal such as platinum may be both noble and precious.
How often is the epithelium replaced?
Epithelial cells are constantly being replaced and regenerated during an individual's lifetime. The epidermis, outer layer of the skin, is renewed every 2 weeks. A totally new epidermis is produced every 25 to 30 days. The epithelial lining of the stomach is replaced every 2 to 3 days. The lining of the respiratory tract is only replaced every 5 to 6 weeks. The liver, a gland consisting of epithelial tissue, easily regenerates after portions are removed surgically.
Which disease is the most common?
The most common non-contagious disease is periodontal disease. such as gingivitis or inflammation of the gums. Few people in their lifetime can avoid the effects of tooth decay. The most common contagious disease in the world is coryza or the common cold. There are nearly 62 million cases of the common cold in the United States annually.
When does the green flash phenomenon occur?
On rare occasions, the sun may look bright green for a moment, as the last tip of the sun is setting. This green flash occurs because the red rays of light are hidden below the horizon and the blue are scattered in the atmosphere. The green rays are seldom seen because of dust and pollution in the lower atmosphere. It may best be seen when the air is cloudless and when a distant, well-defined horizon exists, as on an ocean.
How do permanent magnets differ from temporary magnets?
Permanent magnets, also referred to as naturally occurring magnets, remain magnetized until they are demagnetized. Naturally occurring magnets are found in minerals such as magnetite and lodestone. These magnets are known as ferromagnets.
How do T cells differ from B lymphocytes?
Lymphocytes are one variety of white blood cells and are the primary cells of the lymphatic system, the body's immune system. The immune system fights invading organisms that have penetrated the body's general defenses. T cells, responsible for dealing with most viruses, for handling some bacteria and fungi, and for cancer surveillance, are one of the two main classes of lymphocytes. T lymphocytes, or T cells, compose about 60 to 80% of the lymphocytes circulating in the blood. They have been educated in the thymus to perform particular functions. Killer T cells are sensitized to multiply when they come into contact with antigens, foreign proteins. On abnormal body cells, cells that have been invaded by viruses, cells in transplanted tissue, or tumor cells. These killer T cells attach themselves to the abnormal cells and release chemicals, lymphokines, to destroy them. Helper T cells assist killer cells in their activities and control other aspects of the immune response. When B lymphocytes, which compose approximately 10 to 15% of total lymphocytes, contact the antigens on abnormal cells, the lymphocytes enlarge and divide to become plasma cells. Then the plasma cells secrete vast numbers of immunoglobulins or antibodies into the blood, which attach themselves to the surfaces of the abnormal cells, to begin a process that will lead to the destruction of the invaders. NK, natural killer, cells account for the remaining 5 to 10% of the circulating lymphocytes. They attack foreign cells, normal cells infected with viruses, and cancer cells that appear in normal tissues.
What were some of the accomplishments of Drive? George Washington Carver?
Because of the work of Dr. George Washington Carver, 1864 to 1943, in plant diseases, soil analysis, and crop management. Many Southern farmers who adopted his methods increased their crop yields and profits. Carver developed recipes using cowpeas, sweet potatoes, and peanuts. He eventually made 118 products from sweet potatoes, 325 from peanuts, and 75 from pecans. He promoted soil diversification and the adoption of peanuts, soybeans, and other soil-enriching crops. His other work included developing plastic material from soybeans, which Henry Ford, 1863 to 1947, later used in part of his automobile. Carver also extracted dyes and paints from the Alabama red clay and worked with hybrid cotton. He was a widely talented man who became an almost mythical American folk hero.
Why is some hair curly while some hair is straight?
The shape of the hair follicle determines how wavy a hair will be. Round follicles produce straight hair. Oval follicles produce wavy hair. Flat follies produce curly hair.
What were Anders Engström's contributions to the development of spectroscopy?
Swedish physicist and astronomer Anders Jonas Engström, 1814 to 1874, was one of the founders of spectroscopy. His early work provided the foundation for spectrum analysis. Analysis of the ranges of electromagnetic radiation emitted or absorbed. He investigated the sun spectra as well as that of the aurora borealis. In 1868, he established measurements for wavelengths of greater than 100 Fraunhofer. In 1907, the angstrom, A, equal to 1 × 10 to 10 meters. A unit of wavelength measurement, was officially adopted.
What is a tsunami?
A tsunami is a giant wave set in motion by a large earthquake occurring under or near the ocean that causes the ocean floor to shift vertically. This vertical shift pushes the water ahead of it, starting a tsunami. These are very long waves. 100 to 200 miles, 161 to 322 kilometers, with high speeds, 500 miles per hour, 805 kilometers per hour, that, when approaching shallow water, can grow into a 100-foot, 30.5 meter, high wave as its wavelength is reduced abruptly. Ocean earthquakes below a magnitude of 6.5 on the Richter scale, and those that shift the seafloor only horizontally, do not produce these destructive waves. The highest recorded tsunami was 1,719 feet, 524 meters, high along Lituya Bay, Alaska. On July 9, 1958. Caused by a giant landslip, it moved at 100 miles, 161 kilometers, per hour. This wave would have swamped the Petronas Towers in Kuala Lumpur. Malaysia, which are 1,483 feet, 452 meters, high.
How does complementary medicine differ from alternative medicine?
Complementary medicine is used together with conventional medicine. An example of complementary medicine is using aromatherapy following conventional surgery. Alternative medicine is used in place of conventional medicine. One example of alternative medicine is treating cancer with a special diet instead of surgery. Radiation, and/or chemotherapy. Integrated or integrative medicine combines treatments from conventional medicine with CAM therapies and techniques for which there is evidence of safety and effectiveness.
Which conifers in North America lose their leaves in winter?
Dawn redwood trees, Metasequoia, are deciduous. Their leaves are bright green in summer and turn coppery red in the fall before they drop. Previously known only as a fossil, the tree was found in China in 1941 and has been growing in the United States since the 1940s. The U.S. Department of Agriculture distributed seeds to experimental growers in the United States, and the Dawn redwood tree now grows all over the country. The only native conifers that shed all of their leaves in the fall are the bald cypress, Taxidium distichum, and the larch, Larix larsina.
Who is considered the founder of modern conservation?
Scottish-born American naturalist John Muir, 1838–1914. Is the father of conservation and the founder of the Sierra Club. He fought for the preservation of the Sierra Nevada in California and the creation of Yosemite National Park. He directed most of the Sierra Club's conservation efforts and was a lobbyist for the Antiquities Act, which prohibited the removal or destruction of structures of historic significance from federal lands. Another prominent influence was George Perkins Marsh, 1801–1882, a Vermont lawyer and scholar. His book Man and Nature emphasized the mistakes of past civilizations that resulted in the destruction of natural resources. As the conservation movement swept through the country in the last 3 decades of the 19th century, a number of prominent citizens joined the efforts to conserve natural resources and to preserve wilderness areas. Writer John Burroughs, 1837–1921, Forester Gifford Pinchot, 1865 to 1946, botanist Charles Sprague Sargent. 1841 to 1927, and editor Robert Underwood Johnson, 1857 to 1937, were early advocates of conservation.
When was the first garbage incinerator built?
The first garbage incinerator in the United States was built in 1885 on Governor's Island in New York Harbor.
Who verified the Oparin-Haldane hypothesis?
In 1953, the year that Watson and Crick published their famous paper on DNA structure. Stanley Miller, 1930 to 2007, a graduate student in the lab of Harold Urey. 1893 to 1981, built an apparatus that mimicked what was then thought to be the atmosphere of early Earth. A reducing atmosphere containing methane, ammonia, and hydrogen. In the closed chamber, Miller boiled water, then exposed it to electric shocks and then cooled it. After the apparatus ran for a period of days, Miller tested the water and found several amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins. Eventually, scientists replicating the Miller-Urey experiment were able to generate other types of amino acids as well as nucleotides, basic units of DNA, and sugars.
Are both of the lungs identical?
The lungs are cone-shaped organs in the thoracic cavity. The right lung consists of 3 lobes, right superior lobe, right middle lobe, and right inferior lobe, while the left lung has only 2 lobes. Left superior lobe and left inferior lobe, and is slightly smaller than the right lung. Although relatively large, each lung weighs only 1 pound, 2.2 kilograms.
What are the 2 divisions of the respiratory system?
The respiratory system is divided into the upper respiratory system and the lower respiratory system. The upper respiratory system includes the nose, nasal cavity, and sinuses. The lower respiratory system includes the larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and alveoli.
What is the Genesis rock?
The Genesis rock is a lunar rock brought to Earth by Apollo 15. It is approximately 4.15 billion years old, which is only 0.5 billion years younger than the generally accepted age of the Moon.
What is Aqua Regia?
Aqua regia, also known as nitrohydrochloric acid, is a mixture of 1 part concentrated nitric acid and 3 parts concentrated hydrochloric acid. The chemical reaction between the acids makes it possible to dissolve all metals except silver. The reaction of metals with nitrohydrochloric acid typically involves oxidation of the metals to a metallic ion and the reduction of the nitric acid to nitric oxide. The term comes from Latin and means royal water. It was named by the alchemists for its ability to dissolve gold and platinum, which were called the noble metals.
What plant has the largest leaves?
The Monstera, Monstera deliciosa, has dark green, glossy leaves that measure 2 to 3 feet, 0.6 to 0.9 meter, long when mature.
What was unusual about the original Celsius temperature scale?
In 1742, the Swedish astronomer Anders Celsius, 1701 to 1744, set the freezing point of water at 100 degrees Celsius and the boiling point of water at 0 degrees Celsius. It was Carolus Linnaeus, 1707 to 1778, who reversed the scale. But a later textbook attributed the modified scale to Celsius and the name has remained.
What is German silver?
Nickel silver, sometimes known as German silver or nickel brass, is a silver-white alloy composed of 52% to 80% copper, 10% to 35% zinc, and 5% to 35% nickel. It may also contain a small percent of lead and tin. There are other forms of nickel silver, but the term German silver is the name used in the silverware trade.
What is a pedigree?
A pedigree is a genetic history of a family, which shows the inheritance of traits through several generations. Information that can be obtained from a pedigree includes birth order, sex of children, twins, marriages, deaths, stillbirths, and pattern of inheritance of specific genetic traits.
What is the Darwin-Wallace theory?
The Darwin-Wallace theory can be summarized as the following. Species as a whole demonstrate descent with modification from common ancestors, and natural selection is the sum of the environmental forces that drive those modifications. The modifications or adaptations make the individuals in the population better suited to survival in their environment, more fit as it were. The four postulates presented by Darwin in On the Origin of Species by Natural Selection are as follows. 1. Individuals within species are variable. 2. Some of these variations are passed on to offspring. 3. In every generation more offspring are produced than can survive. 4. The survival and reproduction of individuals are not random, the individuals who survive and go on to reproduce the most are those with the most favorable variation. They are naturally selected. It follows logically from these that the characteristics of the population will change with each subsequent generation. Until the population becomes distinctly different from the original, this process is known as evolution.
What is the cell theory?
The cell theory is the concept that all living things are made up of essential units called cells. The cell is the simplest collection of matter that can live. There are diverse forms of life existing as single-celled organisms. More complex organisms, including plants and animals, are multicellular cooperatives of many kinds of specialized cells that could not survive for long on their own. All cells come from pre-existing cells and are related by division to earlier cells that have been modified in various ways during the long evolutionary history of life on Earth. Everything an organism does occurs fundamentally at the cellular level.
Where is the San Andreas Fault?
Perhaps the most famous fault in the world. The San Andreas Fault extends from Mexico north through most of California. The San Andreas Fault is not a single fault, but rather a system of faults. The northern half of the fault, near San Francisco, has reverse faults and is mostly mountainous. The southern half, near Los Angeles, has mostly normal faults. Land development has made it difficult to see the fault except in a few locations. Notably near Lake San Andreas south of San Francisco. The fault was named in honor of Andrew Lawson, 1861 to 1952. A geologist who studied the 1906 San Francisco earthquake.
When did modern weather forecasting begin?
On May 14, 1692, a weekly newspaper, a collection for the improvement of husbandry and trade, gave a 7-day table with pressure and wind readings for the comparable dates of the previous year. Readers were expected to make up their own forecasts from the data. Other journals soon followed with their own weather features. In 1771, a new journal called the Monthly Weather Paper was completely devoted to weather prediction. The first daily newspaper weather report was published on August 31, 1848 in the Daily News in London. The first daily weather forecast was published in the Times of London in 1860. The first broadcast of weather forecasts was done by the University of Wisconsin Station 9XM at Madison, Wisconsin, on January 3, 1921.
How many different organisms have been identified by biologists?
Approximately 1.5 million different species of plants, animals, and microorganisms have been described and formally named. Some biologists believe this is only a fraction of species that exist, estimating there are more than 10 million species are waiting to be discovered, classified, and named. It is estimated that 15% of all species are marine organisms. Most scientists agree that only 5% of bacteria, fungi, nematode, and mite species have been discovered.
Who is one of the first individuals associated with the scientific method?
Abu Ali al-Hasan ibn al-Haytham, c. 966-1039, whose name is usually Latinized to Al-Hasan or Al-Hassan, is known as the father of the science of optics and was also one of the earliest experimental scientists. Between the 10th and 14th centuries, Muslim scholars were responsible for the development of the scientific method. These individuals were the first to use experiments and observation as the basis of science. And many historians regard science as starting during this period. Al-Hasan is considered as the architect of the scientific method. His scientific method involved the following steps: observation of the natural world, stating a definite problem, formulating a hypothesis, test the hypothesis through experimentation, assess and analyze the results, interpret the data and draw conclusions, publish the findings.
When and where did the concept of numbers and counting first develop?
The human adult, including some of the higher animals, can discern the numbers 1 through 4 without any training. After that, people must learn to count. To count requires a system of number manipulation skills, a scheme to name the numbers, and some way to record the numbers. Early people began with fingers and toes, and progressed to shells and pebbles. In the 4th millennium BCE in Elam, near what is today Iran along the Persian Gulf, accountants began using unbaked clay tokens instead of pebbles. Each represented one order in a numbering system: a stick shape for the number 1, a pellet for 10, a ball for 100, and so on. During the same period, another clay-based civilization in Sumer in Lower Mesopotamia invented the same system.
How can bryophytes be used as bioindicators?
Bioindicators are physiological, chemical, or behavioral changes that occur in organisms as a result of changes in the environment. Bryophytes of the genus Hypnum are particularly sensitive to pollutants, especially sulfur dioxide. As a result, most bryophytes are not found in cities and industrial areas. Mosses and liverworts, especially Hypnum cupressiform and Homolitetium sericeum, were used as bioindicators to monitor radioactive fallout from the Chernobyl reactor accident in 1986.
What is the idea behind open source software?
Open source software is computer software where the code, the rules governing its operation, is available for users to modify. This is in contrast to proprietary code, where the software vendor veils the code so users cannot view and, hence, manipulate, or steal it. The software termed open source is not necessarily free, that is, without charge. Authors can charge for its use, usually only nominal fees. According to the Free Software Foundation, free software is a matter of liberty, not price. To understand the concept, you should think of free as in free speech, not as in free food. Free software is a matter of the user's freedom to run, copy, distribute, study, change, and improve the software. Despite this statement, most of it is available without charge. Open source software is usually protected under the notion of copyleft, instead of copyright law. Copyleft does not mean releasing material to the public domain, nor does it mean near absolute prohibition from copying, like the federal copyright law. Instead, according to the Free Software Foundation, copyleft is a form of protection guaranteeing that whoever redistributes software, whether modified or not, must pass along the freedom to further copy and share it. Open source has evolved into a movement of sharing, cooperation, and mutual innovation. Ideas that many believe are necessary in today's cutthroat corporatization of software.